Please join me in welcoming Hildy Gottlieb.
Thank you so much, Holly. I'm just so deeply appreciative for the work that you do, and that the work that all of you do. I am a library geek, so I just need to tell you, I'm not a librarian, but I'm in a room with my heroes, so this is fun for me. This is like my geeking out. I really want to thank you, Erin. Erin deserves a round of applause, and I'm going to tell you why if you don't know. Erin mentioned that Bethany moved to Texas. Erin and Bethany were the co-chairs of this conference, and when Bethany moved this summer, Erin has been carrying that ball. So would you guys please... And if and when you see her roaming around the conference, thank her and bow down to her, because that is truly, truly an amazing thing. I want to do a couple of little housekeeping things first. Frequently, people will tell you, please make sure your phones are off. That said, please keep them out. And the reason I encourage you to keep them out is take pictures of the slides. We are going to send you all of the slides. I will send you guys the entire PowerPoint of all of the slides. But sometimes we like to have them on our phones. It reminds us, that's the one I really loved. You can draw things on it. But also it allows you to share it via social media. And share everything you're learning today and tomorrow via social media. You know the hashtag. The hashtag is AZLA 2017. I have put my Twitter handle on the slides if that is helpful to you. But what I'm going to share with you today, I want it spread. So share via social media. Keep your phones out for that. In addition to the slides, my partner is sitting right there, Dimitri Petropoulos, and Dimitri is recording the audio, not the video, but the audio. If it works, we will get that to you guys as well. The talk I'm going to do today is a brand new talk. You guys are the first time I'm doing this. Any of you who have seen me in person or seen me online, I tend to not have papers in my hand. I tend to be rather extemporaneous. I'm going to beg your forgiveness if I read portions of this today. This is seriously a brand new talk, and it comes from what we have been learning in the past 2 years of new classes that we've developed at Creating the Future. And so I appreciate your patience if I am looking at what I'm doing here and not entirely staring at your amazing faces. I'm going to also ask if you guys would take out right now 2 business cards, and if you don't have a business card, take a piece of paper and put your name and email on it. In a second, I'm going to tell you what to do with the second one. But with the first one, I'm going to cover a lot of stuff today. If there is anything that you want information on, links to, I will actually create a list. Holly, I will create a list of every single question that I ask today, which is another reason I'm hoping the recording works, and I can send you that. So if there's anything as I go along that you go, ooh, I'd really like more on that, scribble it on the back of your business card. I am going to be doing Q&A, but I'm going to be doing that in the workshop afterwards. If you can't be at the workshop and you've got a question, scribble it on a business card, and so that's why I ask you to take those out. Holly mentioned that questions are my life. And the theme of this conference, because of you, Libraries Transform, transformation is all about the questions that we ask. And so my goal today, if you have been trying efforts towards transformation and have been frustrated, my goal is that you see clearly what is at the heart of that frustration, what's been stopping you. And I'll just let you know right now, it's not your fault. So if you've been trying stuff and feel like you're beating your head against the wall, that's not your fault, and I hope that you see today what actually has been stopping you. If you're looking for new ideas, keep a pen out, because I'm going to be tossing a lot of good stuff that you can try right now, like right now being the minute you get out of your seat when we're done here. So let's start with a simple question. And later I will share with you the power of this very, very simple question. What I'd like you to do is to turn to someone you don't know. So if that is somebody at your table, cool. If not, if you turn around, brownie points for turning around because you probably don't know the person behind you. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask this question right here. And what I'm going to do is take 5 minutes. I know I am giving you 2 minutes apiece to tell the story of your life. I get that. We're just going to get started here. At about 2 minutes, I'm going to raise my hand. So if you see me raise my hand, that means switch. So one of you go, then the other one go. And then I will raise my hand, which hopefully you guys will all come back. So ready, set, go. Okay, let's come back together. This happens every single time. The minute I say go, the room catches fire, and then I work my way back to having some semblance of voice here on the stage. And I just love this. I love this. Let me take a moment and share a bit of the path of my life that has led to my work and let you know a little bit about me. 100 million years ago, I was a political science major and an economics major. And since then have been doing social science research, not always knowing consciously that that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. The research that I did, are we good? I meant to do that. Okay, well, I will read you the quote. And, huh?
I was wondering if you lost it.
Did I? It's up here. It's just not obviously up there. They're not talking to each other.
Go political science.
Go political science. Yeah, there we go. That's okay. I will. I'll wing it because that's what we do here. Okay, back to some semblance of order. As a social science researcher, the thing that has driven me over the past several decades is the push and pull, the frustration and the potential in the following quote. And it is by Ryan Eisler. If those of you are familiar with Ryan Eisler, this is from the introduction of her book, The Real Wealth of Nations. She asks, why, when we humans have such a great capacity for caring, consciousness, and creativity, has our world seen so much cruelty, insensitivity, and destructiveness? All around us, we see that potential. We see it in small kindnesses. We see it in huge, sweeping movements for change. And the question that has been driving me for the past 2 decades to do research and experimentation is what's going on when we're at our potential. Because if we know that, if we can figure that out, we can repeat it and we can make it the norm. And so I have been doing research and experimentation. It started out in the fields of social change. From social change, it moved to behavioral change, wondering, okay, we see what happens with large groups. What happens when individuals are changing? And that led to research in behavioral psychology and neuroscience and evolutionary biology. And then I started to think, okay, well, if that's what creates humans changing, what creates change overall? And started to look at physics and math. And so what I want to share with you today is what has me excited in all of that. The exciting part is that these seemingly existential questions of how we be with each other are all answered by science. By repeatable, provable, measurable science. And so I'm going to share 2 things with you today. I'm going to show you the science at the core of the systems that we adhere to in our day-to-day lives. And I'm going to show you what happens when we use science to change the questions that are at the heart of those systems. And I'm hoping we're going to have PowerPoint. It will not come on. Come on up, guys. Everyone, meet Ted. I'm going to talk today about 3 scientific disciplines. The science of what is physically possible, which is rooted in physics and math. The science of what it means to be human, and the science of having what we need, which is economics. So let's start with physics. The most basic law of physics is the law of cause and effect. Very simple. We all know it. This is because that was. This happened because that happened. Causality connects our past to our present to our future. Today's reality exists because of what happened in the past. Tomorrow's reality exists because of what we do today. The result of that is we have got 3 choices when it comes to how we work with causality. We can do nothing, just go with it. We can rebel against it, we can fight it, or we can create a new causality towards the future that we want. Picture a snowball. We create causality when we roll that snowball down the hill. If we are not creating what is possible, we can react to the snowball. We can try and stop it. We can fight it. Or we can let the snowball make the decision. And that might mean riding it. It might mean being crushed with it. It's pretty much just going with it. There are many combinations of these choices. But because cause and effect is always our reality, these are the choices. This is what the Buddhists call dependent origination. Nothing comes out of nowhere. Everything is dependent on something else. Depending on the circumstances, any of these choices may be the right one. There is no right or wrong, but these are the choices that we have. And the important lesson is that whatever we do, we're creating the future. Even when we let that snowball overtake us, we're rolling a new snowball down the hill. That is starting a whole new cascade of cause and effect. Everything we do is both led by cause and effect and is creating cause and effect. The cause and effect that led to there being humans on planet Earth and how we humans evolved is all about the science of what it means to be human. The evolution of humans is the evolution of our brains. That is our unique attribute. Look at the timeline up here. And by the way, I love this timeline. So if you're inclined to take a picture, I love this timeline. Animal brains have been around for hundreds of millions of years. The first that they are believing, and it's hard to tell because brains are squishy, so they don't exactly last, but the longest that they believe brains have been around in animals is worms, and that is about 500 million years that brains have been on this planet. From the start, the brain's job has been to make us survive, both as individuals and as a species. So that survival brain is highly evolved. It is hundreds of millions years old. That means hundreds of millions of years of refinement. We animals are really, really good at survival. And so contrary to what we tend to call it, our human nature is not the greed and fear that we are thinking of when we say, oh, that's just human nature. When we say, oh, that's just human nature, are we saying nice things? Now, we're talking about the things we share with the rest of the animal world that come from our survival. What is our human nature is our beautiful frontal lobe, the center of our creativity and our wisdom and our compassion. So look at that timeline there. And you can see there's a teeny, teeny, tiny line at the bottom that is humans. Our brains have been around in the form they are, that beautiful frontal lobe, for what looks like about 20 minutes if you look at it compared to everything else. It's about 100,000 years that humans have been on the planet at max, and scientists tend to think that it's somewhere between 40 and 50,000 years. Which means that our unique attribute as humans, we're like not even in beta. We're like the Model A before the Model A. I mean, we are just so, our brains are so not nearly as evolved as that survival brain is. And here's why that is important. When we feel threatened, which brain do you think responds first? The highly evolved survival brain or our barely in beta logic brain? So let's take a look then at what's going on in that survival brain. You notice here that the amygdala and the hypothalamus, that is really our survival brain, and it's real close to the brainstem, which is real close to the spinal column. Right here, the base of the head and the back of the, right at the top of the neck, that's where all that survival stuff is. I think that's awesome, personally. I mean, because it goes right to your arms and your legs, right to where it's needed. It's located very, very strategically. The things that are going on in that survival brain, one, chemicals like adrenaline are released. We all know what adrenaline feels like. It increases our heart rate. It increases our blood pressure. It's the thing that gets us going if something bad is about to happen to us. The other thing that's interesting, though, about the brain is that it also releases a chemical called cortisol. Cortisol's function is to sort of smooth the way for all the other things that are happening in the brain when it's time to get out of there. It shuts down the functions that would interfere with our survival. So, for instance, it slows our metabolism. Because if something bad is happening, I don't need to be digesting my lunch. I need to be getting energy to the muscles and getting it out there. So one of the other things that it shuts down is access to the frontal lobe. Because think about it. If the tiger's coming, we don't want to look and go, oh, I love tigers. Look at how stripy he is. No, we want to get out of there. By the way, do you ever wonder when people talk about survival why it's always a tiger? I've never figured that one out. If you guys have ever experienced being scared or feeling nervous, and you are saying the words to yourself, I'm just not thinking clearly, that's physical. That is physiological. That is actually chemically induced by our bods, and I just think that is amazingly awesome. I think that is just amazingly awesome. That shows what 500 million years of evolution can do. You'll notice I keep talking about feeling threatened. And the reason I talk about feeling threatened is because our brains don't know the difference between an actual threat and a perceived threat. So when you wake up in the middle of the night, you've had a nightmare, your heart is racing, it's not real, but our brains don't know that. When we're in an action movie or a scary movie and your heart is racing and you're like eating popcorn as if you're the one that's on the screen and needs energy, our brains just don't know the difference. And so if you have been in a meeting where you have proposed something cool and creative and possible and you want to talk about what's possible and you're getting the rebuttal of, oh, get real, we've got work to do. That is because that person who's saying it, his brain, her brain, is feeling threatened. It could be by the pile of work that's on his desk. It could be by the budget that they're not sure they're going to meet. But that's what's going on when you're meeting that resistance. It is an automatic chemical response that overrides. We'll go back to our little fence there. It overrides our ability to be creative. It stops it. And then we have to work extra hard to access that frontal lobe. And so here is the key to unleashing our potential. The key to unleashing our potential is to stop that threat mechanism from firing in the first place. Because when we don't feel threatened, we humans are amazing. And we've all felt that. When you're doing something that you're just totally in flow, that threat mechanism isn't firing at all. You're just feeling what it is to truly be human. When you're in a meeting and it's been 2 hours and you look at your watch and you go, how could that be? It feels like 10 minutes. That's our potential. That is our human nature. The ability to envision a future that is different than our past, that's our human nature. The ability to feel connected to the 7 billion people on this planet, most of whom we have not met, can't even envision, that's really our human nature. That's our reality when we feel safe and not threatened. One of the ways that we create a feeling of safety is predictability. And one of the biggest ways to create predictability among us humans is we create systems. Systems are really just, that's the way it is. And we create all kinds of things around those systems, but systems make it easy to know what to expect and to identify who doesn't fit. Because if we're doing just the way we do things, then we know that you're not doing it, you don't fit. And that's why people don't buck systems. That's why they cling to systems even when they know the system isn't working, because we feel that safety and that predictability. Individuals will go where systems lead them. Individuals will go where systems lead them, and that's why. So we create the way we do things, and then we reinforce that with rules and policies and laws and social norms. And you're starting to get a sense of what's really going on. Can't hear me. My mic stopped working. Hey, Mark. All right. I was a mom. I can make it louder. I'm going to save the last science, the science of economics, for later, because even with just these two sciences of what is possible and what's going on as humans, we're beginning to answer Ryan Eisler's question here. Our hundreds of millions of years of evolution have created a survival loop. And for us to get off that hamster wheel, two things are clear. One, we need new systems so that just the way we do things keeps that threat mechanism feeling calm and happy. And the second is that in changing systems, it's going to require that we change our thinking. And the most direct way to change our thinking is to use science to change the questions that thinking is answering. Let me repeat that. The most direct way to change our thinking is to use science to change the questions that thinking is answering. Those new systems will lead us to create what is possible, and just the way we do things can then be guided by our human potential. So let's look at what systems could look like if they embody those questions, and what you guys can do right now to transform your organizations, your libraries, your communities, and your own lives. First, let's look at the science of what's possible when we mindfully create cause and effect. Our day-to-day decisions are filled with the three possibilities of the choices we have regarding causality. And that includes your personal decisions, the decisions you make in staff meetings, the decisions you make as a team, and big planning initiatives. Decisions at every point can change depending on whether we're asking, what do we really want? And what are the conditions that will lead to that? Versus, what is the problem and how will we fix it? With what you already know about brain science from what we have been talking about, one of these sets of questions is going to trigger our threat brain. And one of these sets of questions is going to be a direct path to our creativity and our reason. So now let's look at the questions that we typically ask that our systems lead us to in decision making. What is the problem? Ooh, I'm back. What is the problem? My favorite one, what is the root cause of the problem? Because it's not just enough to know the problem, we've got to dig deeper and feel worse about all. And root cause frequently comes with blame, which feels great. How will we prevent the problem from never happening again? How will we be proactive and go around the problem? This is what we do as the norm. How do these questions make you feel? I feel anxious just looking at those questions. My heart races when I look at them. I wrote this slide and my hand was shaking. And this is what we consider just the way it is. This is our normal. Interestingly, it is not just the brain science that makes these questions ineffective. It's physics, and especially math. So let's talk about math. We learned in grade school that eliminating something negative does not get us something positive. -1 + 1 is not 35. -1 + 1 is 0. So when we're talking about eliminating homelessness, eliminating poverty, eliminating the dropout rate, we're actually talking about getting to 0. We're talking about stasis. We're not talking, we think of that as a grand scheme. Oh my gosh, we're going to end poverty. But in actuality, we're talking about getting to 0 because you can't get there positive. -1 + 1 is not 35. In reality, though, when you're in planning sessions, when we're talking day to day, we say, you know what, we're not going to end poverty. But we can reduce hunger by 30% or 50%. So what we're really saying is we're at -5, and we'll be totally good with being at -3. And that's what we do in our strategic plans. When we are reacting in our strategic planning is supposed to be us at our best, right? We are planning for kicking ass over the next couple of years, and that's really what we're saying. What we're saying is we're going to be reactive and incremental, and we're going to call that good. Now, do we need to solve our problems? Yes, we absolutely do. We cannot have an equitable, kind, beautiful, healthy world if there's homelessness and poverty. But we don't stop there. We keep going and say that this is on our way to creating something good. It's not just about getting out of the way of the snowball. It's getting out of the way of the snowball so that we can get back up the hill and roll a different snowball. So we're ending homelessness. We're ending homelessness on the way to creating something good. Hey, Ted, come on back. Don't shake your head. It's the gods.
Murphy's got a cough back there. He does.
It's okay. It's okay. You think about the war on terror, you think about the war on drugs, you think about the war on anything, those are reactive. If you want to know why the war on drugs isn't working, you want to know why the war on terror, the war on crime, the war on poverty isn't working, we're reactive. We're being reactive. And still, that is what we think of as the norm. Those questions that I shared before, those are what we see as the norm. Thank you, Ted. You want to just sit on the steps here? Truly, thank you. If you have been frustrated in your own efforts towards transformation, this is why. It is mathematically impossible to create something positive by reacting to something negative. And I'm going to repeat that. it is mathematically impossible to create something positive by reacting to something negative. And the good news is that all changes when we change the questions that we ask. When we look at what happened with gay marriage and how it seems that gay marriage became the law of the land pretty quickly from the time we started talking about it, if we look at the decades of struggle, that gay marriage seems to have happened, quote, overnight. The conversation changed from reacting to an injustice to celebrating love, and things changed. Martin Luther King did not say, we have a problem, even though we had a problem, and we still have a problem. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. And within 50 years, we went from Jim Crow to Barack Obama. Organizationally, changing just one question can change your daily decision-making and your strategic planning. And so here's a system you can try right now as things come up in your staff meetings, in your team meetings. Asking the question, if this were no longer a problem, we're past zero now, if this were no longer a problem, what would good look like? What would that make possible? And then aiming your plans at creating the conditions that will roll that snowball down the hill. So now let's look at the questions related to what it means to be human. These questions relate to systems including everything, including how we be in staff meetings, HR policies, laws, and just how we be with each other. The choice of the questions is therefore the difference between asking what will bring out the best in us versus what will protect us from each other. Clearly, the answer to Ryan Eisler's question lies in bringing out the best in each other. So let's look at the questions we normally ask. And these are just a few. How can I make sure you don't cheat? How can I make sure you don't steal my stuff? If we're going to compete, how do I make sure we win? Basically, the questions that we systematically ask are, how can I make sure you don't do something bad? Because I'm not going to do something bad. You're going to do something bad. And that's what we root our day-to-day in. If you have been frustrated by systems that feel inhumane, it's because our just the way it is sees people as a potential risk. And I know I don't have to ask you how that makes you feel. I also don't need to show you the math of what happens when we suspect the worst and make rules that react to the worst. And you can see that this just creates that hamster wheel. Those systems of mistrust mathematically cannot create good behaviors. And again, there's good news. There's a different loop that we can create. Because when we expect to bring out the best in each other and create systems that lead us to our best, it feels like magic, right? When we're in systems that are bringing out the best in us, it feels like magic. It's not magic, it's science. When we ask what will bring out the best in people, the first answer is always, we need to know each other. We need to know each other. So let me ask you guys, how many of you know the person you introduced yourself to better than some of the people you work with every day? We don't take time to get to know each other. If we don't take time to get to know each other, how can we build trust? How can we bring out the best in each other? I want to share with you a story of one of our fellows at Creating the Future. And our fellows are people who have done a deep dive, and it's pretty much a continuous, it becomes a lifetime dive into our education programs in the things that bring out the best in ourselves and the things that bring out the best in situations. And Edri runs a department in a rural county community in northern Nevada. She works for county government, like many of you guys do, and in a very, very rural area. And so her team is spread, when it's rural and your team is out in the field, they're like out in the field. They're everywhere. And so the opportunity to get to know each other, work together, is not a whole lot. Well, after one of the class sessions that we were talking about this, Edri said, I'm going to put this into practice right now. And she called a staff meeting and said, we're going to take the entire day and we are just going to answer the question that you guys talked about early on. What is the path of your life that led to doing this work? You chose this work. Why are you doing it? What is your story? Edri said that by the end of that day, they did nothing but tell their stories. She said by the end of that day, they were a team. And that was a year and a half ago, and they're still a team. At Creating the Future, if you watch any of our meetings, we're a global organization, and so our meetings happen online. But you can watch any of our meetings. Again, if you want URLs, I will send you stuff. But we invite people to not only watch our meetings live, but be part of them. So if there's something you're interested in, you go, I'd love to be in that meeting. I'd love to be in that discussion. Just come on. And what you'll find is that we start all of our meetings with a check-in. How are you doing? What's going on with you? What are you bringing into the room today? And it's real simple. I mean, I want to know if the person sitting next to me, or in our case on the screen, I want to know, are they being cranky because they hate me? Because isn't that where we go? She's always, she doesn't like me and anything I say. Or is she being cranky because she didn't sleep for 3 days? So I want to know that. And so we do check-ins. And then the next thing we do is what we call awesomes. And we ask, what has been awesome in your life since we last got together? Doesn't take long. This is 5 minutes. What has been awesome in your life since we last got together? And we learn about kids and grandkids, and somebody lives on a lake and the ducks are doing something cool, and it's about humans. It's about getting to know each other as humans. It doesn't have to be that question, but just something that brings out the human in us. My daughter works in the entertainment industry, and so when they start their meetings, they talk about movies. What did you like about it? Pick a movie. What did you like about it? What didn't you? It allows them to get to know each other as people. And then when we close our meetings at Creating the Future, we always close with reflection. Just a couple of minutes of look through your notes and what stood out to you. What are you feeling as we leave this meeting? And what we found is, in this, sort of it ended parking lot conversations. Because all the stuff that we gripe about in parking lot conversations, we're asking about it in the meeting. What are you feeling? Did this do what you needed it to do? Is there something missing? And we end with reflection. And again, these are just systems that we've put into place that allow the day-to-day to bring out the best in us. And of course, culturally, that is totally not what we do. Culturally, we get down to business, because that stuff I just talked about is a touchy-feely waste of time, right? We don't have time for that. What we have time for is getting down to business, start the project as quickly as you can, and then slog through it. We're lucky if we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, because frequently we take 2 steps forward and 4 steps back, and we talk about that as we couldn't have known. We wish we had known. We couldn't have predicted. Of course we could have predicted. If we'd taken time to get to know each other and ask a whole bunch of questions, we build trust, and what you find is if you take that time up front, the work is joyful, and it happens quickly and smoothly. It may feel efficient to get down to business, but it is actually neither efficient nor effective. So let's go back and take a look at our wars on drugs and crime and all of those things. What would be possible if these efforts aimed at bringing out the best in the people? If it wasn't about the thing, the drugs and the terror and the crime, but was about bringing out the best in the people. Can you imagine what our prison systems would be like if their goal was to bring out the best in the people in prison rather than punishing them for stuff they did when they were at their worst? And this is just the way we do it. So here's some systems that you guys can try right now. And again, we will be sending you guys the slides. In your staff meetings, do check-ins, get to know each other. And get to know each other as people, not positions. In meetings where you are getting together for the first time, go around and ask people to tell their stories. If you're going to do an initiative with a group of people that you know you're going to be with for the next 1 to 2 years, take that first half day and get to know each other. Ask about their winding path. Get to know each other as people, rather than, she said she is a head librarian from, I can't remember where. And that's what we do. We go around and we do at those meetings what my friend and colleague Carlo Jensen calls the circle of death. I'm Susie, I'm with such and such, I'm Mary, I'm with such and such. By the time we get to the third person, we forgot who the first person was. Let's tell our stories and be real with each other. I know that many of you work inside of systems where you don't have a lot of leeway with human resource policies, but you've got some. You've got leeway to change some of the questions you ask in your employee evaluations. Are we asking questions about what brings out the best in that person? And again, when issues do arise, thinking about what would good look like for that person? What would bring out the best in that person? So now let's get back to the science that I skipped, the science that triggers every fear we have, the science of having what we need, which is the science of economics. Oh my goodness, what happens in our brains when we don't think we have what we need. And whether that is money or food or shelter, whether that is having to compete for a grant from a foundation with other people who just want to do good work, whether that is having to make the case for your government budget. And again, the language matters here. That feeling, when I say you've got to make your case, how do you feel? Great, right? That triggers all the good stuff. But when we have enough, that threat mechanism doesn't fire. And we can be generous and compassionate and kind. It lets us be human with each other. So here is the science of economics. We do have enough. We have enough when we stop talking about money and we start talking about real resources. And real resources, not being money, is at the base of economics. Because economics will teach you money's not a thing. Money is a placeholder. It's a thing we use to exchange what I have for what I want. But money on its own does us absolutely no good. So what do I want? I want things like a house and a car, and I want somebody to teach me French. I really do want somebody to teach me French. The stuff we need is all around us, and it's easy to share. But that, again, is not the question our systems ask. Basically, all the questions our systems ask when it comes to economics comes down to, where's the money going to come from? Have you guys ever come up with an initiative? And that's the question? Where's the money going to come from? And that makes us feel great and powerful and positive. No, it just sucks the life out of us again, because that's our cortisol brain triggering. And so again, we have a choice. We can ask those where's the money going to come from questions, or we can ask what can we accomplish together and what do we have together. It's like that old story of stone soup. And at Creating the Future, we call this the economic principle of collective enoughness. That together we have everything we need. It's only on our own that we feel scarcity. One person may have some of what we need. Together, we've got everything we need. The normal system, the way we do things, is based on the 100% scientifically unprovable theory that there is such a thing as going it alone. There is no science anywhere that tells you that there is such a thing as going it alone. Each and every one of us is reliant on each other and reliant on our planet. Everything is interconnected and interdependent, whether we acknowledge that or not. I could share tons and tons of stories of building programs based on collective enoughness and sharing resources. I'm going to do some of that in the workshop. If you're not able to be in the workshop, we're going to try and record that too. Hopefully the recordings are at least working. It's been an interesting day. For now, I want to share a story that is in my TEDx talk. And again, if you want the URL to that, let me know on the back of your card. It is the story of an AIDS organization in a rural community where they were starting to see the incidence of AIDS increasing among certain populations. And one of those populations was seniors, because seniors didn't feel they needed to have protected sex, and some people didn't want to talk to seniors about protected sex, and so they were starting to see an increase in that incidence. And where we would normally go is, well, we need a campaign, right? We need billboards, we need a PR campaign, we need to maybe get a marketing person out to get the word out to seniors. That's not what this group did. What this group did was acknowledge that together we have everything we need. They gathered a core of volunteers, and those volunteers became their community engagement team. And they offered that community engagement team to other organizations where seniors gather. And they would go volunteer when there were volunteer needs at those organizations. So when the theater needed volunteers, the AIDS Coalition's volunteers went to volunteer. When church groups needed volunteers, the AIDS Coalition volunteers went to volunteer. They wore their bright orange t-shirts, which would start conversation, and what did they do? They just worked side by side with the very people that they wanted to communicate with. And they told stories, and they got to know each other, and they shared their mission. So here are some of the things that you guys can try. The next time you hear, where's the money going to come from, ask these 3 questions instead. First, what will this project make possible and for whom? That's the cause and effect question. Something's going to make something possible and for a lot of other people. For the AIDS organization, the for whom was for seniors. The second question, who else cares about this? What could we accomplish together? And what will bring out the best in those people? Again, that very, very human question. And for the AIDS organization, they knew what would bring out the best is just having conversation. And then lastly, what resources do we have together? That economic principle of collective enoughness. And clearly what the AIDS organization had was people, volunteers. Living in scarcity and going it alone, we hoard volunteers because we're afraid somebody's going to steal them. And that just triggers all of that bad stuff in our brains. But knowing we have enough and can share, the AIDS organization actually worked in tandem with the volunteer center in their community. That if any senior group contacted the volunteer center's first job was to call the AIDS organization. Collective enoughness, we have everything we need. And now I want to share with you guys my dream for libraries, because like I said, I love libraries and I see potential everywhere. I love the vision of seeing libraries as hubs for collective enoughness. Places where people can gather and engage, guided by systems that bring out the best in them, where there are systems for sharing resources and knowing what each other has. You want to talk about transformation. That's not just transforming libraries, that's transforming whole communities. And that's my geeky dream. 3 sets of sciences, 3 sets of questions. What is really possible? What will bring out the best in people who care about that? And what do we have together? At Creating the Future, we call the practices of using these questions catalytic thinking. We call it catalytic because a small spark can create a huge flame, and that spark can be just a single question. Catalytic thinking practices make explicit and repeatable the things that have brought out the best in us since the beginning of time. And it's interesting, when I do talks like this, someone will come up to me afterwards and they'll say, I practice appreciative inquiry. And what you're saying really sounds like what's at the heart of appreciative inquiry. And I'll say, yes, I know. And somebody else will come up to me and they'll say, I'm part of a collective impact effort in my community. And a lot of what you're talking about would be really a perfect fit in collective impact. And I say, yes, I know. And somebody else will come up to me and they'll say, I'm a Christian. And what you're saying resonates really deeply with me in my faith. And I'll say, yes, I know. And somebody else will come up to me from my own faith tradition, which is Zen Buddhism, and they'll say, I'm a Buddhist, and this really feels right to me. And I'll say, yes, I know. And the reason I can say, yes, I know, over and over and over again is we know what works. And we've known for thousands of years what brings out the best in us. And so what we've done with catalytic thinking is just take it, create a framework around it that makes that repeatable, that turns it into practices that make it repeatable. It begins with catalytic listening, which is listening to bring out the best in the person I'm listening to and bring out the best in me. It moves to catalytic decision making, which allows us to pivot from reacting to what's wrong to creating what's possible, and then create a cause and effect path towards that. And then lastly moves into the practices of that economic principle of collective enoughness, which is everything we do, doing it with others, because together we have everything we need. At Creating the Future, we are a collection of people all around the world with a singular goal. We have a 10-year mission, and that 10-year mission is an experiment. And the experiment is very, very simple. To find out what would happen if we change as many systems as we can around the world to bring out the best in all of us. The reason our meetings are open is the reason that I asked you guys to please share this stuff via social media, is because you are invited to be part of that. Creating the Future is a collection of people around the world because we're an open invitation. If there's anything I've talked about today that interests you, if you'd like to experiment, if you'd like to take a class, no matter what it is, that's why we exist, because we've got 10 years to change every system in the world to bring out the best in all of us. In the workshop, I am going to do a couple things. I am going to talk about what it takes to turn that +1 vision into a plan for reality, and what it takes to create the conditions towards that. I'm going to give you at least one example of a collective enoughness initiative so you can see how it looks in practice to share resources. And I will answer as many questions as I can. And again, if I don't answer them, put them on the back of your card, and I promise I'll answer them. In closing, I want to tell you one more story. And this story is not about a nonprofit, and it is not about a government agency. It is about my mom. My mom passed several years ago. She was 90. She was pretty healthy up until almost the very, very end. And so at 87, my very healthy mom had her eyesight going and a little bit of her depth perception going. And we were really worried about her driving because she was very active. She was taking classes all the time. She was going to the theater all the time. And we were worried about her driving. And so we were going to have the conversation. And I can just ask you guys, what's the conversation? We had to take away the car keys. How's that make you feel? Right? And that's how we talk about it. We talk about it when you're my age, and we talk about it when you're my mom's age, and we all don't want to have that conversation. And so that's not the conversation we had. At 87, my mom and I sat down, and I said, Mom, what do you want life to be like in 10 years when you're 97? And she said, oh, I don't want to live that long. I said, well, you're on the way. you're heading there in pretty good form. So what do you want life to be like? And she said, well, I really want to keep doing the things I love doing. I want to go to the theater. I want to take classes. I want to do that and live as independently as I can. And I said, that's perfect. And I wrote it down. I put it on a little piece of paper, and I said, is this it? She said, yeah. And I said, so if something happens and the doctor says you can't drive for whatever reason. I don't want to get into it, but if for whatever reason the doctor says you can't drive, how do we want to make sure that you can continue to live independently and do all the things you love to do? And she said, you know, my friend Sarah, she had an aide, and that worked out really well for her. I'd like to get it, if that happens, I know it won't, but if that happens, I'd like to get an aide. And so within several months, we had the conversation with her doctor, and her doctor had a conversation with her, and yes, my mom got an aide, which wound up being such an amazing gift for her. Because Rafi was there to the very, very end, which was about 2 years later for my mom. They wound up becoming friends. I hope you're seeing that this is not about your work. This is about what it means to be a full human on planet Earth. This is not about positional power, because any of us can lead from the middle by changing one single question. And so right now, you guys can release that frustration that is rooted in systems that are rooted in fear. The joy is that every day you get to choose. You can choose to share your toys. You can choose to bring out the best in others. You can choose to aim your work at what is possible. It's not hard. All it takes is giving yourselves permission to ask one different question. Thank you guys so much for the work you do. It is deeply in my heart. Thank you.